my colleagues if they could start the YouTube stream, which it looks like they have. So when you are ready, Mr. Chair, you may begin.
Okay, thank you. And in case you didn't hear, Councillor Oosterhoff points out that he will need to leave at 10:30.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So that's Jennifer has come in. Good, so welcome all to Heritage Kingston meeting. We are missing Paul and Moya, though I suspect they may come in any moment. We haven't heard from them. And we have lost Matthew McCartney, who has resigned from the committee. So you have an agenda. I have a notice to add to other business, a question on 168 Wellington. And so I will formally add that to the agenda. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Councillor Doherty, you need to unmute.
Hi, thanks. I just want to advise you that I need to leave at 12 as well for a meeting after. And I just wonder if we heard why the resignation. Matthew was a great member on the committee, and I just wonder if there was some feedback that we could perhaps learn from, or if it was a personal decision.
I have not heard any. I simply got a letter noting the resignation. I don't know if the clerk heard anything more than that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, I am not aware of the reason I received the same notice that you did, Mr. Chair. However, I do see that Ms. Campbell does have her hand raised. Perhaps Jennifer may wish to address.
Jennifer?
Thank you, and through you. I just wanted to update that I have reached out to Matthew on behalf of the Heritage Kingston Review Working Group, which has developed a series of surveys, and I asked him if he would be interested in participating in offering some feedback through one of those surveys. And so I'm hoping he has agreed that we would do so. So I have to send that to him, but I think that will offer him and afford him some opportunity then to share some more information, if not specifically about why he resigned, but about his experience on the committee and suggestions and thoughts he might have for how to move forward.
Good, thank you very much. Further additions to the agenda? Seeing none, then I look for a motion to approve the amended agenda. Jane and Councillor Doherty. Further discussion? Seeing none, those in favour of approving the amended agenda? So you have an agenda. Confirmation of the minutes of January the 20th, looking for a mover to approve. Councillor Doherty, thank you. Is there any discussion on those minutes? Jane, need to unmute yourself.
Yes. Page 9, the paragraph 6. I just want to not change my comments, but clarify my comments, which I sent to Elizabeth. So it should read aluminum composite panel, acrylic lettering, and metal awning. And also changes in the window, add the word openings.
Elizabeth, do you have those changes?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have received those changes.
Okay, so maybe they could, if they're approved, maybe they could go out in these minutes then. Further discussion on the minutes of January? Seeing none, then we need a mover to approve those minutes. Somebody who was at the meeting.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, we did receive a mover and a seconder already.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Remind me who they were. Don and...
Yes, Mr. Chair, it was Mr. Taylor and Councillor Doherty.
Councillor Doherty. So you have a mover and a seconder. Further discussion, and seeing none, those in favour, those opposed, you have a set of minutes. Pecuniary interest in the two items we have today, and as ever, if anything else comes up that you hadn't realised, please let it be known immediately. Presentations, delegations, briefings, business. Jennifer, I believe you wanted to speak somewhere here.
I think you're calling to me. Thank you.
Yes, Jen, sorry, I forgot we had two Jennifers. My apologies. Thanks.
That's okay. Thank you. I just wanted to bring to the committee's attention something that actually relates to the earlier comment I made about Matthew's resignation from the committee. The Heritage Kingston Review Working Group has been working with a consultant, Larry Graham, to complete some interviews in relation to people who have been involved with the committee in the past. And as part of that, several of those interviews have been translated into an online survey document, and those are now available on the Get Involved platform of the City of Kingston. So I did just want to make the committee aware of that because there are no notes currently being brought forward to highlight this. I will be emailing this link out, and I'm happy to circulate that to Elizabeth or the clerk if that suits, so that the committee can see the link. But essentially you would be invited as any member of the community to participate online by sharing feedback through, I think there are 3 in total surveys. So depending on your past experience, you could answer all 3, or you could answer whichever one best suits your opportunity to provide feedback. So I just wanted to draw that to the committee's attention, since there are no notes coming forward today, to draw them for you. And also I'm excited to share that we've already had 30 people complete surveys. So off to a good start, I think. Thank you.
And the closing date for that is sometime in March?
That's correct. It's currently flagged at the end, at the beginning of March, but we do have a working group meeting next week where I think we need to discuss the timeline for the survey and see whether or not we need to extend that date.
Great. Okay. Any questions to Ms. Campbell? Seeing none, thank you. Anything else on cultural heritage or business, museums? Which gets us down to statutory business, 312 Princess. Ryan, this is Alex's or yours?
That's me. Hello.
Hello.
So I'll just wait for the presentation to come up. There we go. All right, so this is the application that we first saw at our last meeting on January 20th. It's an application for alteration under Section 33 of the Ontario Heritage Act for the property at 312, 314 Princess Street. And the applicant, which is McDonald's Restaurant Canada, is seeking Heritage Act approval to make changes to the storefront and building to facilitate the relocation of a McDonald's restaurant to the existing commercial unit. Next slide, please. The subject property is located at the southwest corner of Princess Street and Clergy Street, as you can see. Next slide. The storefront has undergone multiple renovations. I'm sure many of you recall, but I just wanted to quickly brief us on the background of this property. So the original storefront was removed sometime before 1976, as we can see in that image by W.M. Baird. The current storefront, although traditional in its design, is a modern addition which was constructed in the 1990s following significant building fire. At this time, the rear portion of the building, which fronts Clergy Street, was entirely reconstructed, and portions of the historic building were also reconstructed using salvaged stone that was left on site. Next slide, please. The property contains a 2.5-story limestone commercial building constructed circa 1840 and designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. This building marks the beginning of a block of important commercial buildings, many of which are also designated under Part 4 of the Act. At present, the building contains a single commercial unit with residential units above that are accessed via the entrance at the west end of the Princess Street elevation. Next slide, please. So this property was designated under Part 4 of the Act in 1981. The designation bylaw simply has one sentence which says the parapeted end wall of this 1840 stone building marks the beginning of an almost a block of important commercial buildings. The list below is a draft list of heritage attributes that one might begin to describe and note in an updated statement of cultural heritage values. So the scale and massing of the 2.5-story building, a pitched roof with a parapet wall, the parapeted end wall with chimney and decorative stone corbel, the limestone masonry walls, and certainly the original window openings with their stone sills and arches. Next slide, please. So this is the first submission that we saw that was submitted by McDonald's. Certainly it generated a lot of feedback from the committee as well as from heritage planning staff. Significantly, there was concerns from staff about the asymmetry that was being introduced to what is a very symmetrical and balanced building with that white awning taking that 90-degree angle. The removal of all of the wood, including the decorative window wood mullions, certainly caused some concern. The loss of the gooseneck lighting, some of those traditional elements that certainly did respond or do respond to the existing building. So in response to the concerns and comments from the committee as well as staff, it was led to a second submission. Next slide, please. Which is the design that was presented at the January 20th meeting. And at this point, the committee did appreciate the progress of the design in relation to that original submission we just saw, but there were still several concerns that were voiced, and these largely pertain to the design of the front elevation and the palette of materials that was proposed. And as a result, at that meeting, the committee voted to defer the decision and to provide the applicant with some time to further address the concerns and comments that were raised. In terms of what were the sort of shared comments, they largely related to, one, how the proposed modern materials responded to the character of the heritage building and its contribution to the streetscape. There was a very strong preference for wood or possibly a modern equivalent. And the second shared concern related to the red panel on the front of the building, insofar as that it would conceal a window and a column, and how that fit within the design of the front storefront. So in response to those comments, we had a third submission, which we'll bring up now on the next slide. And I want to draw your attention to some of the key changes that are made in this submission. So this submission, the key changes from the previous include the removal of the red aluminum composite panel with the M logo, the addition of the yellow vinyl window graphic, which is on the interior of the glass, the use of aluminum lettering painted in white for the McDonald's sign lettering, as well as the McCafe lettering on the Clergy Street elevation, and the internal lighting of the yellow M on that mast arm sign, but actually no lighting of the red box around it. So a decrease in the internal illumination, as well as a change in some of the materials for the lettering. And of course, the big one being the removal of that red panel. So leaving the existing patterning of opening windows. So I would say that the most significant modification is really the removal of this red panel. With its removal, the design of the storefront now mirrors the existing storefront in terms of its size, scale, proportion, and the rhythm of solids to glazing. The revised design retains the size and location of the fascia board, all the existing columns, the wood windows in their existing locations, as well as the decorative wood mullions. Additionally, the columns and decorative wood mullions continue to align with the stepping out of the stone foundation. This revision further improves the symmetry and balance of the storefront, which in turn better responds to the symmetry and balance that is characterized by the architectural style of this building. Now, the other key concern that was shared by the committee related to the proposed palette of materials. So that palette of materials included aluminum composite panels, which would clad the columns and also be used on the fascia board, as well as on that small white awning that runs across the top of the storefront. The main signage, which is the McDonald's lettering, is now a painted white aluminum cutout, and the mast arm is aluminum metal composite. Now, I know that the committee was very keen to see all the wooden elements of the existing storefront retained or replaced with new wood, and the applicant did agree to retain the existing wood windows, transoms, and decorative mullions, which helped to provide the visual interest and texture in relation to the new modern materials. However, the applicant has advised that they did carefully consider the committee's preference for wood, but they maintain that they do wish to use the modern palette of materials, and this is largely due to the quality of the material and the longevity in terms of maintenance and appearance over the long term. So if we move to the next slide, we see the Clergy Street elevation as well as the front elevation, and I wanted to just draw your attention to the lighting scheme, which will include the retention of the gooseneck lighting, repainted in black, the back lighting of the McDonald's lettering on Princess Street and the McCafe sign on Clergy Street. And this is what they call the halo lighting. And essentially what it is there'll be aluminum cutout letters with a light strip mounted behind. And essentially what you get is the light hits the back of the opaque aluminum lettering, but then obviously it deflects and provides a glow. So the letters aren't internally illuminated. They aren't even ringed with light. It's that the light's coming from behind and hitting the solid, which then creates that glow. And certainly this is a much gentler lighting strategy for a heritage building and will be easier for pedestrians' eyes than the traditional internally illuminated box signs. And additionally, the mast arm sign will be internally lit, but the red box will be, essentially the red box will be opaque and it will be only the M that is translucent and lit up. Staff are very supportive of the retention of the gooseneck lighting, which is compatible with the style and age of this building and complements the historic character of the streetscape. Staff have included a condition requiring additional details of the halo lighting and all other lighting to ensure it does not compete with or overwhelm the heritage building. Next slide, please. So in the absence of specific local heritage policy for storefront alterations, we have to look to section 4.3.5 of Parks Canada Standards and Guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada. Now, these guidelines include guidelines for the rehabilitation of storefronts. I know Ms. McFarlane pointed these out as well, and these are really what we have to look to in terms of our assessment. In Guideline 20, advises that when installing new storefronts required by a new use, the design should be compatible with the building style, era, and character. It also additionally advises that new storefronts should not obscure, damage, or destroy character defining elements. Now, it's not particularly specific in how you go about accomplishing that compatibility. So this is where we have to look at the existing building and its style. So we have a late Georgian style commercial building. It's largely characterized by symmetry and balance. There's a regularity in the rhythm and proportion of the solids, which is the limestone walls and the glazing of the windows and doors, which is present on the second floor and as well as on the current storefront. There's very little ornamentation on the building apart from that end parapet wall. So when we look at the design of a new storefront, whether it's traditional or modern in its aesthetic, we need to make sure that it responds to the architectural style that we just spoke to. So particularly in this case, the rhythm and symmetry. So we've looked at the removal of that red panel and how that certainly improves the layout and rhythm and design and how that responds to the existing building. And certainly staff are very supportive of that improvement and feel very confident that now the existing design in terms of that layout of windows and solids and rhythm with the existing building is very much appropriate and compatible. So the other issue then relates back to the palette of materials. Now, certainly staff have supported the use of modern materials on heritage buildings, but this is obviously the caveat that they have to be compatible with the heritage attributes of the building. So in this case, that's the limestone exterior wall. So what new materials would be compatible with these limestone exterior walls? And we need to make sure that can be demonstrated. Certainly wood is a traditional and very much an appropriate material for an historic building, and staff would certainly support wood on a storefront such as this. However, that doesn't preclude the use of modern materials in that they are inherently inappropriate. So in some circumstances, even certainly the introduction of modern materials can allow for new work to be distinguishable from old. So in this instance, staff are supportive of the modern material, and that's simply because we feel strongly, and we have included a condition so that we can see a sample and ensure that the finish is appropriate as well. But certainly that in this case, the use of an aluminum composite panel in combination with the retention of the historic, well, not historic, but traditional period wood columns and windows will be compatible with the limestone of the walls of the building. And I think that certainly when we see a sample, we can look at whether a matte finish or whether a gloss finish is more appropriate. And certainly if we see those samples and we feel that we are not satisfied and that we have concerns, then we will continue to work with the applicant to see if we can make an improvement there. So I'm going to move now to the next slide to say that I'm going to present the recommendation, but really in summary, the design of this new storefront and the associated alterations has evolved in response, significantly evolved in response to comments that have been provided by the committee as well as heritage staff. The applicant has been very receptive to these suggestions, and we've worked closely with the architects to address the comments and concerns as far as possible. Staff do continue to be supportive of the application, and are satisfied with the results of this final round of revisions, which certainly is in response to the comments that were received at the last meeting, and we've seen great improvements. Certainly, the proposed storefront does represent a departure from the current aesthetic. However, it does retain the traditional elements of an historic storefront and mirrors the existing scale, size, proportion of the existing storefront. Certainly, the new design will not obscure or conceal any heritage attributes on the building. And by retaining the existing pattern of columns and windows, the design responds to the symmetry and balance that is characterized by the style of the building. So staff are confident that the heritage value and the heritage attributes of this building will be conserved. So I'm going to leave you with the recommendation before you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex. And we didn't get the second screen that had a number of conditions on it. You've got those in your minutes. So, committee members, questions, comments, thoughts? Oh, a fight between first hands. Donald Taylor.
Yes, well, I appreciate the improvements. I think I'm glad that the applicants have listened to us and to the staff. Well, I have a bit of concern in that when I tried to read the blueprint, the plans in detail to find out what materials were where, the resolution in that plan wasn't good enough to see, so I couldn't tell whether a certain panel had been restored or removed or what. So I wonder if you could go back and look at the front of the storefront and just confirm that the wood column, existing columns remain wood, and I guess the fascia board is now going to be modern material. Is that correct?
So the large columns and the fascia board will be the aluminum composite. But when you look at the windows with the decorative wood mullions that run between them, as well as the transom across, those will be wood as existing, and they will need to be, some of them will need to be repaired. But yes, so basically the large columns are composite, aluminum composite, but the smaller wood mullions are wood.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, I just want to thank the applicant for working with the Heritage Committee. I think the final product is so better. It really will fit in well with the surrounding buildings, and it looks very attractive, actually. I don't have a concern regarding modern and old combined materials. I think that's often quite interesting, but I do have a question for staff. How do we ensure that they are actually compatible?
Sure. So essentially, following, depending on what happens with the committee today, it will go to council, and if it all follows through in their support from council, what happens is their approval will have the condition that includes samples of the material to be sent. Now, in this day and age, it won't be something that we can circulate to the committee, but obviously Heritage Planning staff will get samples of the aluminum composite panels and any other new materials that are being proposed. And certainly it's going to be up to Heritage Planning staff to take a look at that sample. And certainly I would plan on going to site and holding it up against the building in the wood and really getting a good sense of how we feel it would be compatible, if or not. And certainly if we receive it and we have major concerns, then we won't hesitate to continue that conversation with them.
Thanks. So I have no concerns with this.
Jane, I have a hand up. Need to unmute. So.
Thanks. And I actually had the same problem as Dawn reading those plans. I got out a magnifying glass and I think I read what I saw. I don't know. Anyway, I do appreciate that the applicant, along with Heritage Planning staff, have been able to take the time to work through and adapt the plans to make the rehabilitation of the building more heritage compatible. And I'm especially pleased that the symmetry of the storefront is maintained on Princess Street. That looks great. I'm still concerned about the use of metal for the solid components of the storefront and awning or fascia. And I feel that if this is to be the choice, heritage staff will definitely need to ensure that the quality and the design of the metal paneling will be compatible. I'm really happy that Alex is going to take the panel out and take a look at it on site. But I also want to say that Kingston is trying to focus on sustainability and reduce, reuse, recycle. And I really find the applicant saying that they're looking for quality and longevity in these metal panels is questionable when wood on heritage buildings has lasted for hundreds of years. So I just kind of want to point that out from there. And the other thing I would like to say is I recognize that the golden arches are iconic and what they've done with the front window should be just fine. However, I'd like to also mention that the Mick Cafe is also newer, but also iconic to McDonald's. And the sign, the Mick Cafe sign, could look quite striking against bare limestone. And then the modern looking wood paneling on Clergy Street could be left off. I'm going to leave you with that. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Oosterhoff, you had a hand up.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, I just echo some of the supports here, Councillor Doherty, what she said, and really what everyone, I really appreciate the effort being made for the compatibility. As I said, I'm about a year into this. I really recognize and appreciate that when the applicants begin to work closely with Heritage, I think that we see opportunities and of improvements and just really coming alongside each other. And I see that here, and I like what I see. So, and I do agree with Jane as well. I think wood is an excellent choice. It lasts, or well, it can last an incredible long time and really add to the heritage component. But I do want to acknowledge the applicant and how they are working closely now, and we're going to see positive results, and we can move forward today. So I'm pleased by that. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. Other members of the committee?
Last one, sorry, Mr.
Oh,
Chair.
sorry, yes.
One question I had for planning was, with the concerns that we have, Mr. Chair, will there be a site plan control? Is that what will be moved forward so that we can have some say over some of the materials as construction happens? Is that possible, site plan control?
So, Councillor Oosterhoff, if this property, like the work that they're doing doesn't require any planning application, so we can't require site plan control. But the conditions that we include as part of the heritage approval have to be carried out and satisfied before the works can begin. Okay,
that's good. And I feel that there's going to be a cooperative effort all the way through, so I feel very comfortable with this. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Other members of committee? I don't see any hands at present. Members of the public wishing to speak? And I'm not seeing any hands there. And I'm not hearing anything from the clerk. So we move to a motion to approve the recommendation that you have in now be careful on this. This is on the first motion on the minutes. Looking for a mover. Councillor Oosterhoff, seconded by Councillor Doherty. Thank you. Further discussion? Oh, what an excellent group you are today. Seeing none. Oh, Mr. Taylor.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm understanding the procedure here, because we had a deferred application.
Yes, and if you look in your agenda today, you will find under statutory business D1 on pages 2 and 3. That is the motion we are dealing with. If it passes, then D2, which was last time's motion, becomes irrelevant.
Okay.
So you are approving the motion, which has all of which we have just talked about, and the rest will disappear magically. Thank you for questioning that. So yeah, the motion is the one that is printed on page 2 as D, statutory business D1. I have a mover and a seconder. I'm looking for any further discussion, and seeing none. So those in favor, if you could put your hands up, and those opposed, and that is carried. And Elizabeth, make sure I'm doing the right thing here. That means that D2 is now out of date. And we pass right on to page 5 for 124 Center Street.
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, 124 Center Street. Who's taking us through this one?
Morning, Mr. Chair.
Good morning, Ryan.
So the subject property is 124 Center Street. It's known as Otterburn. This is an application for removal under Part 4 of the Act, Section 34. Can we go to the next slide, please? So the property is on the southwest corner of Center and Union Streets, as you can see in the slide. Next slide, please. It is designated under Part 4. The building you see is known as Otterburn. It was built in 1830. It's designated under Part 4 in 1975 and amended in 1976. The property is also subject to a heritage easement agreement with the Ontario Heritage Trust under Part 2 of the Act. Next slide, please. The designating bylaw notes the 1.5-story stucco-clad Regency-style house and the large, elegant garden, which is interesting for this application as we are looking at the garden wall on this property, but I would note that the garden wall is not identified in the Part 4 designating bylaw. Next slide, please. So the property is owned by the Congregation of the Beth Israel Synagogue, which is immediately next door. They're currently looking at restoration plans for the Otterburn house itself, including repairs to windows, doors, and porches, which will be before this committee next month. But currently we're looking at this particular wall. This is Union Street. As part of the renovation plans, the owner commissioned an engineering report on the structural integrity of the limestone wall, given its obvious lean towards Union Street. The engineering firm of Reed, Jones, Christopherson, RJC engineers, concluded that the wall is, quote, very poor condition and structurally compromised, unquote. They recommended that the area be immediately secured with fencing and the wall be shored to ensure it doesn't collapse. Next slide, please. The pictures you'll see in the next slide are from January, where they have actually screened it off for public safety reasons. So the application before us today is under Section 34 of the Act. It's a request to remove this remnant portion of a stone garden wall. The freestanding limestone wall is approximately 6 meters long and 2 meters tall. The wall appears to have been constructed sometime in the early 1900s, 1911 to 1957 in that area. The applicants have retained Laternal Heritage Consulting, LHC, to review the history and cultural heritage value of this feature and to prepare the application. So their report is included in your agenda package. The LHC report determined that the wall is a later addition to a larger wall that no longer exists. The report concluded that the wall is not a significant heritage attribute to the property and recommends its removal. So in terms of our review, this property, as I mentioned, is a municipal designated property for the exterior and is also has an easement with the trust for interior and exterior features. Neither of these descriptions or these tools mention the limestone wall in their documents. The standards and guidelines directs one to understand the contribution of the built features on the property, and that's towards its heritage, cultural heritage value of the property, and to document the condition and function and its relationship to the overall historic place. And the garden wall, while it contributes to the scenic appearance of Union Street, really has little relationship to the cultural heritage value and history of the Otterburn property. So according to the research prepared by LHC, the garden wall does appear as a remnant to a, it does not appear to be a remnant of a former building or historic perimeter wall. It appears to have been added as a landscape feature approximately 100 years after the construction of the Otterburn House itself. A number of the committee members recommended that the wall be disassembled carefully and the stones be stored and reused on site or offered to others for use within the city. On behalf of the applicant, LHC notes that the stones will be salvaged and reintegrated into the landscaping on the property where appropriate, and a condition of approval has been included to that effect. Staff are of the opinion that the proposal will not negatively impact the cultural heritage value of the subject property and will uphold the cultural heritage conservation objectives of the city's official plan. So in terms of our circulation, the trust noted that an application has been submitted with them for the removal and that this is not a heritage attribute of their easement. The committee provided comments which are attached in your agenda package and staff recommend, so next slide will be your motion, and staff recommend approval with a number of conditions. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Just for my information then, condition 3, the approval from the trust, that has already been received?
I believe an application, Mr. Chair, has been made. I'm not aware if they have received approval.
Okay.
But I can tell you that there are members here of LHC as well as the applicant, and I believe they wish to speak.
Okay. We'll get
that for you.
Get to them in a moment then. Thank you very much. Committee members, questions on this? Remembering it's just the wall that we're talking about. I know you've also dealt with Otterburn itself. Questions on the removal of the wall? Donald Mitchell.
I think this is a question for Ryan. When I first looked at the application online, I judged the wall in context of the property itself. And just reviewing and going on Google Maps and looking at it again, I wondered about the contribution to the area, and in similar way with the old penitentiary markers that are stuck around all of our various properties in my area. And so I just wondered whether you could expand a little bit on the contribution to the area, about its scenic contribution, just to confirm that you can remove something that's obviously got heritage quality from an area, but that the decision is based on the property itself. It's not based on any contribution to the area unless it's Part 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe the member has almost answered his own question. Yes, the property, the wall certainly adds to the character of the streetscape. The difficulty, I think, falls in the fact that we don't fully understand the heritage character of the street as it is, as in it is not a Part 5. It's not that the process to do a heritage designation, a heritage conservation area designation, has never been fully vetted in this area. So there really is no basis for denying the removal of this application based on that that assessment. So we do have to sort of fall back on the Part 4 itself, which is the only tool we have in this case. And that particular designation speaks primarily to the gardens and the building itself, but not specifically this wall. And adding to that, some of the research that the applicant's consultant has done has indicated that the wall is sort of a later feature added as a nice architecture or a nice landscape structure. But really, it doesn't have any history that we could sort of hang our hat on either. So we bring it to you as advisors to council for your consideration, and it's the decision that council has to make in this regard. If it's worthy of retaining, or if it's maybe not adding to what is being protected on this particular Part 4 property.
Okay, thank you. Further questions from committee? And I don't believe I am seeing any from the public. Got Marcus here. Marcus, do you want to comment on this at all?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you,
welcome
Mr.
back to the committee.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of council, members of the Municipal Heritage Committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today on behalf of our client, the Beth Israel congregation. Several members from the board are here, and I know they may have some questions following my presentation. As Mr. Leary indicated, this is the first part of what will be a larger application. I know we've been working with both Mr. Leary and the Trust on a rehabilitation project for the broader Otterburn house. With regard to this application, we did want to provide a couple notes of clarification. There were some questions about how the wall was shifting. Based upon the work we've done, it's actually because of tree undergrowth that has shifted the wall. The wall, we actually had a tree growing underneath it, which is why you have that 17-degree list to it. And as part of the application coming forward, there are some additional trees that we have noted that are overhanging the existing building, which we'll be talking about at a later date. As Mr. Leary has indicated, based upon our research, the wall is a later addition. There was actually at one point a structure where the wall exists. Based upon our research, it appears to have been a wooden structure. There was actually quite a prominent wall that existed, but it appears to have been removed prior to 1970, as we outline in our report. With regard to the recommendations before you, our client does have a couple of questions which we would appreciate some clarity on. The first is the building permit shall be obtained as necessary. We just wanted to confirm this was for the demolition and the removal of the wall. We can also advise that the Ontario Heritage Trust has provided its approval as of 9:15 this morning. So that it just literally came through while we were setting up for the meeting. And we did have a request for consideration with recommendation for that any reusable stone units shall be salvaged and stored on site and or donated for reuse. We just wanted to get a little bit more clarification. Based upon our read of this recommendation, it appears that our options are to store on site or donate for reuse. We were wondering, our plan is to salvage the units, but we were wondering if we could leave it as any reusable stone units shall be salvaged. We have had actually some people from the Heritage Masons ask if they can reuse it for other building projects within the community. There is a discussion of how we can consider integrating this into the landscape. And if there would be some ability for flexibility upon that recommendation, it would be greatly appreciated. At this point, I have no further comments, but I will defer to my client if anyone from the congregation has any additions. So,
Thank you, Marcus. So do we have anybody from the congregation who wishes to speak? You raise your hand, as you know, and you'll get recognized. And Madam Clerk, Michael Springer, there we go.
Good morning. I just wanted to thank Marcus. I think he's done an extraordinarily good job on researching this wall, and I believe he's expressed and communicated to the committee our thoughts. So I just wanted to reiterate that. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Other members of the public? Okay, now a question, I guess it goes to Ryan and the clerk. Do you want to amend your condition 4 to delete and stored on site and or donated for reuse?
Mr. Chair, I would recommend that perhaps Mr. Leary could respond to some of the questions that Mr. Letourneau had posed and see how those answers perhaps addresses his concerns.
Okay. Ryan?
I'm happy to do that, Mr. Chair. The first question had to do with the building permit. Yes, I believe the building permit was to remove the structure, but we can we'll confirm with the building staff to determine what that means. That's a separate process, and we'll certainly look into that. It's couched by as necessary, so if it's not necessary, we'll be satisfied. The condition that has to do with the stones, the intent with that condition, at least from a staff's perspective, is that those stones don't go to waste. So I don't think we have any objection to amending that condition, provided that the stones are being used somewhere in the city. I think that's a great idea. So if it makes the applicant more comfortable and a little more flexibility in their respect, we certainly have no objection to that.
Okay, so I will look for a committee member then to make that amendment. Is that right? They can make amendments to conditions? Yeah, okay, so that is one that I would ask for. Other members of the public? And seeing none, I don't believe, oops, sorry, excuse me. We then move on to a mover and a seconder to approve, knowing that we're going to make a minor change once we've got it on the floor, looking for a mover. And seeing Councillor Doherty and Councillor Oosterhoff seconding. As printed on its page 5 of the introduction to the agenda, page 99 in the body of it. Comments, questions from the committee? Mr. Taylor.
Yes, I think that's fine. It seems to me that the existing condition allows enough flexibility, but I certainly wouldn't object if someone wanted to change it. I'll just add a comment that these stones, and there include some quite substantial squared dressed stones, are really not, I really don't see any obvious use for them elsewhere in the property. And the best use for them would be to a heritage mason. And with luck, you might find a heritage mason who would just take them away for almost nothing. So, I mean, I think that's the best way to proceed. Thank you.
So are you willing then to make a motion to delete and stored on site and or donated for reuse?
I can't see the condition at the moment.
Oh, sorry, it says, condition 4 says any reusable stone units shall be salvaged and stored on site and or donated for reuse.
Yes, I'd be happy to move to strike the words after salvaged.
After salvaged, down between salvaged and reuse. Is there a seconder for that deletion? Paul Banfield, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, before we continue, for a motion to amend, I do need it in writing as per the procedural bylaw. So perhaps if we could just take a brief recess, if Mr. Taylor would be willing to send a quick email that just specifically states that those words be deleted, then we can add it to the record and we can formally discuss it.
Well, I can do that, but really, Mr. Chair, I think this is so straightforward, deleting some words. I think the clerk can do that on the screen, and so we can all see it. So there shouldn't be any confusion.
Mr. Chair, I'll leave it to you to decide what the best process would be for the committee. However, it does require to be in writing. If that is preferred, that I do that on the screen so that the committee can see that, or I can.
Well, we've done it on the screen in the council chamber, so there's no reason why we can't do it here, I wouldn't think.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'll just if I could just ask for a brief 2-minute recess so that I could get that prepared for the committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I was wondering if I could ask another question.
Well, I'm waiting till we've got the clerk here, Michael, and then you certainly can. I noticed your hand was up. If we could just wait and then come back there.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Once I see that the other members have come back, I do have it prepared for you.
Okay. Well, we have a quorum here, so, and Councillor Oosterhoff was going to be leaving anyway, so he may, oh no, there he is, there we go.
All right,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I do have that this would be the amendment clause, that condition 4 be amended to delete the words "and stored on site and or donated for reuse." And then the new amended clause will be this below that has removed that line there.
So it now reads, any reusable stone units shall be salvaged. And 5. So you now have an amended motion. We haven't moved or seconded that. Mr. Taylor, I presume you're going to move that amendment?
Yes, I have, and I think
And
Mr.
seconded
Banfield
for the
seconded.
amendment is Donald Mitchell. Further discussion on the amendment only. That's the deletion of "and stored on site and or donated for reuse." And seeing none, those in favor of the amendment. Those opposed, thank you. We're back now to an amended motion. And I'm going to apologize to you, Michael, because in the middle of a discussion, I can't bring in members of the public, I've realized. If you've got something urgent, you better phone Marcus and deal with it that way. But we're in the middle of now voting or further discussing and then voting on the amended motion. Further discussion on the amended motion. And seeing nothing, those in favor of the amended motion, those opposed, and that is carried. So thank you very much, all of visitors, Marcus and Michael. We now go down to working group reports. Jennifer?
Thank you, and through you. I think the only thing I had to share in the working group was sorry, being prompted for video. The only thing I had to share was that quick update about the Heritage Working Group. And as I said, I will share that with Elizabeth, and hopefully she can circulate that to the members of the committee, and they can share it amongst their networks as well. That would be wonderful.
Good. Thank you very much. Emergency approvals, Ryan?
None this month, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. Motions, we don't have any. Notices of motion? Okay, other business. I have a question from Don Taylor on 168 Wellington.
Yes, I wonder if staff can provide any information or updates about what's going to happen to the and gable wall along Wellington Street. I think in the original plans, it was simply going to be left or minor repairs, but I have heard that there is an idea to introduce a new entrance to that end wall and rebuild the wall accordingly. And there may be some questions as to whether that's okay in terms of structural integrity and all that sort of thing. So I wonder if there's any more information on that.
Ryan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The wall, the only approvals to the wall, so 168 Wellington, for everyone's benefit, is the Grey Trust, Victoria Grey Trust building on the corner of Wellington and Brock. It's formerly was Scotiabank, I believe. It's currently in the midst of a renovation for residential units on the upper floors. So what I believe the member is asking is the north wall, which is currently a concrete plastered rendered sort of material. that was added at some point when whatever building that was in that space, this is the access to the Hanson parking garage now, was removed. This wall was patched up. So the current owner was granted emergency approval a few months ago, as that parging is starting to now fall into the public right of way there. And they got approval to repair that. I believe it's going to be a similar material that they're repairing it with, is what they got approval for. The new opening, I do recall seeing that, but I don't believe that was in the current approval. That is something they're looking at as an option, but I don't believe they were granted approval for that new opening. So I hope that answers the member's question. Just a repair emergency to keep plaster from falling on the public.
Well, that's fine. I trust you're keeping in contact with the applicants, because I've noticed that since the parging came down, that there's a very attractive brick wall there. And so, you know, the question, and it's very visible to the street. So I think the appearance of that end wall is important, and certainly staff should be keeping a watch on that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Taylor. Thank you, Ryan, for answering that. Correspondence, you've got at the end of your package the correspondence from the Ontario Heritage Trust. Our next meeting is, March the 17th. I think that's the anniversary of the lockdown, isn't it? So we've got 1 year now of these meetings. And looking for a motion for adjournment. Moved by Councillor Thaugherty, seconded by Donald Mitchell. Those in favour? Those opposed? Oh, somebody's opposed, goodness me. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, everybody, for being here and helping. Good luck to all of you. Bye-bye.